Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Welcome to Navigating the College Search for Students Who Learn Differently. My name is Sydney Ruff, and I am Senior Director of Admissions at Landmark College, and I'm also an alum as well from Landmark. And today we're just going to go through a little bit of what it's like and what you need to be thinking about as you look at college options, as well as what might be next, even if college is not necessarily the next step, and how you can kind of plan for that. All right, so just an overview of what we're going to discuss. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and my background, a little bit of some of the terms that we'll be using, what we can learn from some of the data, levels of support in college, how the legal landscape changes from high school to college, how we might go about finding the right fit. We'll talk a little bit about disclosing, and then I'll just do a couple of minutes on Landmark specifically. All right, so a little bit about me. I'm originally from Waterville, Maine. I currently live in Brattleboro, Vermont. I have dyslexia, ADHD, also anxiety, and school was really hard for me. The only thing that I looked forward to in school was the friends there. I was very much a social person and not an academic person, so I thought. School really meant, especially for high school, going through my classes. I had a resource room once a day, and typically from the time that I left the high school and to as long as it took me to drive home, which was about 20 minutes, that was my cry time. That was the amount of time that it took me to process the day and think about the amount of work that I had that night. And that required me to cry. It was a ton of work, and it was a full team effort from my family to get me through school. My mom did history and English, my dad did math and science, and my sister did languages. So my diploma from high school was really a shared diploma. Ironically, my last name is Ruff, so I call it a Ruff diploma, but I feel like that's sort of a bad title for it if you don't know the last name very well. I was a varsity athlete. I was class president. I had really terrible SAT scores. And most of the colleges that were on my list, my college counselor told me the colleges were no longer an option because of my scores. My parents always had Landmark on the list, but Landmark to me at the time was a school for students who learn differently, and that was exactly what I didn't want. I wanted a college that created a new identity, or so I thought. And so I said we didn't even have to look at it. And so we drove to Vermont from Maine. I fell asleep in the car. We were supposed to go look at the University of Vermont here, and we ended up at Landmark instead. Ultimately, I did end up going after some convincing, and I completed my associate's degree there. And that was all that Landmark was offering at the time. I then went on to Syracuse University for my bachelor's degree, and then on to Simmons for my master's. And at the end of that, I really didn't know exactly where I wanted to start next. And my mom asked me a very important question, which was, when was the last time you were really happy? And that was Landmark, so that's where I went. And I've been back with the college for almost 15 years. And today is extra special for me because my two former campus ambassadors are also now working in admissions as full-time staff. So this is an incredibly special moment for me. All right. I really like this. I'm sure people have seen this before, but everybody is a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. And I think that's so important for what we're doing in this session. There isn't one right way to do this, and there's lots of opinions that will tell you what they think. But I'm really going to encourage the student and the family to really think about what's best for you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. So some key terms. Neurodiversity is all of us. Sometimes you hear these terms and you're not exactly sure what they mean, so I think it's really important that we just kind of talk about them. So neurodiversity means all brains function differently. That's incredibly important for our species. Everyone's brain is different. Differences should be accepted and, more importantly, valued. I think it's so important to have different minds and different ways of approaching work. I think we all do better when we have different perspectives at play. Neurotypical, that's what society considers a typical brain and development, cognitive and intellectual functioning as well. And then we often hear the word neurodivergent, which this is what society considers an atypical brain development and cognitive and intellectual functioning included. That could be in terms of like dyslexia, dyscalculia, autism, ADHD, and so forth. And I think this is important to kind of change the culture as well as far as how we talk about learning differences in general. I'm working two screens here, so just bear with me. It's like putting my ADHD to full test. All right, so here's a little bit of context, which I think the numbers are helpful for what we're going to discuss. 1 in 5 students right now out of the country have a diagnosed learning difference. That's about 20%. And out of the students that are going to college, 24% that have a learning disability are disclosing. Another 25% of students with other health impairments, this often includes ADHD, are disclosing, and 63% of autistic students are disclosing. So quite a difference as far as who's disclosing and possibly even why they're disclosing. But still a significant percentage are not disclosing, and I think that's more of the important part. All right, so the impact. I find this particular fact, this first one, to be so important. It's hard to believe that the post-secondary graduation rate to complete in 6 years is 51%, and that's a national number. That's not an LD number. That is a specific, all students, 51%. So when you think about going to college and your likelihood to succeed, I think it's so important to discuss fit as a part of that discussion. What makes the best ability for you to succeed, grow, and learn? Among the neurodivergent students, these are the completion numbers. So 38% complete with learning disabilities, 35% complete with autism, and 34% complete with other health impairments like ADHD. In one study at a large university, students who waited until after their first year to request accommodations had 3.5 times the risk of not completing their post-secondary education. And that's why we're talking today, is the importance of advocating early and being comfortable in addressing what you need. And we'll talk about how we might get there too. So let's talk a little bit about the levels of support. So starting all the way over with the ADA compliant, this is what most schools have. Most schools are ADA compliant. That means that they can provide some accommodations. It might vary drastically around what they might provide that way. Usually there's no cost to have these accommodations. There's probably a very small amount of staff that are aware of why the accommodations are important, why they might be important to you, and how you might access them. Students have to get comfortable advocating, and that's what we can start while they're still in high school. Examples of ADA compliant schools, if you think of like the University of California system, those are mostly ADA compliant at this point. Most Ivy Leagues, although if you've seen some of the recent news, some of the Ivy Leagues are changing that. But most Ivy Leagues still offer pretty much minimal support. Then we go to the next level of coordinated services. You'll find accommodations plus some skill building. They're usually universally available services. You'll typically see smaller student to staff ratios at these schools. Also, no cost to get these coordinated services. Still, students must advocate, and you'll start to see a trend there as the importance of that. Keene State, which is a school that's close to Landmark, just over the border in New Hampshire, has an example of a coordinated service program. Then we go one more level, structured programs. Sometimes these are even called fee-based or comprehensive programs. As a part of these comprehensive programs, you're going to get academic tutoring, you're going to get academic support, skill building. You might have a weekly meeting with a learning specialist. You'll have a full-time specialized staff members that have training, typically in working with students who are neurodiverse. They have a less student to faculty, they require a little bit less student advocacy. So if your student isn't necessarily quite advocating consistently at their top level all of the time, you might consider more of a structured program for support. Examples of some of these programs, Curry College, for example, in the Massachusetts area, they have the PAL and SAIL programs. These would be considered fee-based as well as structured programs. You might also know Thames, which is a part of the Mitchell College program. That's another example of a structured program. Then we have one more category, LD colleges. We might need to change that category name. But there's only 2 colleges in the country that are dedicated to working with students who are neurodiverse. And that's Landmark and Beacon College in Florida. So these programs are comprehensive academic, social pragmatic, and executive functioning supports. They have full-time staff that everyone on campus is aware of how to work with students, and everyone has that training. Typically, there's no additional fees past tuition itself. All right, so now we'll talk a little bit about the legal landscape. All right, so when we think about high school, students are typically under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act or the IDEA. In this type of environment, students, schools take the lead. Schools develop the support. Typically, they implement an IEP for each student who needs one. They write what type of accommodations the student can access. Usually, parental involvement is encouraged, or better yet, needed, in order to access the right accommodations, and parents are often the advocate in many of these discussions. All teachers and staff are aware of the student's disability status in the high school setting. Now we think about college and those differences. Now the students are under the ADA, which is the Americans with Disability Act. Now, students not only take the lead, but often families can't be involved. Now, some schools have different policies that way, but typically they'll want the student to take the lead in these discussions. Students assume primary responsibility for their education and must self-advocate. Only instructors that the student notifies will be aware of their status. And that's where the student advocacy becomes so important. If you were to see me when I was 18 and had to be asked to talk about my learning difference, it would be full tears and there would be no words. That was my advocacy because I didn't know how to talk about it and it was so uncomfortable for me to discuss it. So that's why it's so important that students remain as involved in this process as possible. And as the student progresses in high school, really push the student towards having that conversation more and more and being the lead in the IEP meetings. IEPs and 504 plans have no legal weight in college. They can be used as guidance, they can be used as a reference, but it is not a requirement for schools to give you the same accommodations or even different ones based solely on your IEP or 504. All right, so now we'll talk about making the transition a little bit easier. What can we do? A big part of that is looking at your transition planning. Starting early is really helpful, at least to start looking at what your options are. So when transition plans specify the accommodations a student will need, or students are much more likely to both access and utilize them. A good college match means understanding what you expect, need, and want from your college years. So spending a little bit of time just thinking about that as a student, thinking about what you like in high school, what you don't like in high school, and really allowing yourself to explore what's out there. Aligning these factors with what a college offers and delivers becomes very important. And that's why we encourage students to engage in the process as much as possible. So finding the right fit. When we talk about questions to start asking yourself as a student, these are relatively large questions, so it's not like you have to sit there and answer all of them at once, but certainly having them maybe on a piece of paper on your desk, or something that you're seeing on a relatively normal basis. And you can start thinking about these answers. Who am I and what do I want from a college experience? What type of learner am I? In what environment do I learn best is another good one. What are my strengths and weaknesses? What accommodations and supports will best ensure my chance of college success? Think about some of the supports that are make or break for you in high school. And then that will help you sort of determine what you need to start looking for in college as well. So a little bit about the process. What do you need? What supports are in your IEP or 504? Talk to the people that are on your team, meaning your family, your teachers, anyone who is involved with your school environment. That could be a counselor as well. Ask them about what they see as the importance for your college success, because sometimes they might see something that you haven't seen. Not because you're not looking, but just because you don't know that that's been a support that's been in place, and you don't know enough to know that it might not be a standard support that's available. Develop that list of accommodations and the supports you're looking for. And then start looking at what do schools offer. Typically, a lot of schools nowadays will put most of their supports right on their website. Some schools, it's hard to find. It's not an easy process. But if you start to look at them, you'll start to sort of see standard places, or even start using the search features to get to those a little bit easier. There's also, if you're someone, not me, but someone who enjoys reading over videos, you might enjoy the K&W guide, which is a guide specifically for students who have a learning difference. And this is a really wonderful resource. Every college pretty much in the country has a page in that book, and it will list out all of the accommodations, the supports, the process. It's incredibly useful. Especially if you're a reader. Okay, the biggest difference of how you can learn about this is engaging with the colleges. Call the admissions department, but also call the disability services. Or better yet, when you're visiting, make appointments at both. You might not know what to ask. That's 100% okay. Disability services are usually not in the admissions building. They do not know that you are going in, nor are they allowed to use any of that information. But don't feel like you going into that building is somehow going to discredit your admission into that college. And if it does, then that is not the right college for you. Also, determine the location of disability services on college campuses. Is it in a convenient location for you? Is it a place that you're going to use on a regular basis? If it's so far away from everything else that you're going to be using, it's probably not likely that you're going to want to traipse all over just to get to it. So it's really important to at least know where it is. If you're not making an appointment at the disability service, do yourself a favor and at least walk into the building. Sometimes you can tell a whole lot just from what's on the walls around you. Or is the environment something that you could see yourself in? You know, is it really busy? Is it not? Is it quiet? Is it not? Like just some of the things that it could just feel very different. But if you go to the college and you don't go through the building or those doors, you're not going to know, even though you might have read a ton about it from their website. All right, a little bit more about the process. A really great resource is Dr. Eric Endlich's website. It's called the Directory of Learning Support Programs. And he keeps this website incredibly up to date. And what he does is any college in the country that offers any level of support, he has it listed, and he, better yet, also reviews those colleges' support too. And any student that he works with, he'll also put up their feedback on their website, on his website. Using AI, very helpful, but just as a resource. Just like anything, the human touch is really important, but go ahead and add, questions into different AI resources like ChatGPT. This was one that, the example that I put up here is what colleges in the US offer learning environments devoted to supporting neurodiverse students. And this is an example of the list that came up. These are not all of them. This is just some. And what you can do is you could take, let's say, the University of Arizona. You could put that in and say, what colleges have similar support to the University of Arizona? So there's lots of different ways, obviously, that you can use all of your resources, but you can also get pretty overwhelmed in the process, which is why that list that we talked about is really important. Because now you know what you're looking for from that list. And guess what? Parents, you could also have your own list of the accommodations that you want to be looking for during your college visits as well. Because sometimes the parents might have a slightly different perspective on what their student needs, and that's okay too. The family might think, if my child needs this, I want them to have it. Whereas the student might say, I definitely won't need it. And it just might be nice to know from both sides. Okay, disclosing, a very popular topic. All right, why don't students disclose? Could be a fear of stigma. That was certainly a part of it for me. Well, let's be honest, all of these were a part of it for me. But sometimes there's that desire to create a new identity. Some will say that I don't have a learning difference, so why should I have to disclose? Even better yet, some might say, I don't believe that my diagnosis is accurate. You might be unfamiliar with the disability services and what's available and how to access, so that might play an impact on how you choose to disclose. You might also have the invisibility of the support and accommodations you're receiving now. Some high schools do such an incredible job building in the support to the point that the student might not even be aware that those are accommodations and not the school's natural teaching ability of what they might be doing. So it could just be so ingrained that this is just what my environment looks like. And this is what every college environment look like. And you also might just be very much underestimating the importance of accommodations. So disclosing when and why. That's an important question. I think it's so important to figure out why you're choosing to disclose, because that might tell you when to disclose. But let's start with why you should disclose. It is the only way that you'll receive accommodations. It's the only way colleges are going to know, because most colleges are not asking if you have a learning difference, nor can they. You might disclose that in the admissions process as a part of your interview or personal statement, but that stays with admissions. No one else on campus sees that file. So just because you disclose to admissions doesn't mean that that then goes to disability services. So when to disclose? So accommodations must be in place at most colleges for the beginning of the semester. And in fact, most colleges have a cutoff deadline to that, the average being about 2 weeks from the start of classes. So if you're someone who says, well, I don't really need accommodations right now, but then midterms hit and things are getting overwhelming and you say, oh, I really would like that extra test time or a different environment, you might be out of luck. Most colleges would say you have to wait until the following semester. So it's really important, even if you're not using the support, to at least have it in place. And then you can decide later if you want to use it, but at least put it out there as an option. Now, the big part, do you disclose during the application process or after? That's completely up to you. Completely, entirely up to you. My recommendation is disclose early. Give yourself the option to at least know what's out there and put it out there so that you're able to evaluate services, attitudes, and experiences. How easy or hard is it to access these services that will foster success? So let's say you go and you tell admissions that you have a learning difference. They may not know about the disability services or be able to tell you about it, but then what do? Do they say, let me put you in touch with them. Let me give you someone's name and you can reach out. I think they would be a better resource for you. Or do they say, I'm not really sure, it's up to you. That's pretty telling. So just by disclosing and giving people the option to tell you how they want to engage might tell you a lot about the college. Yes, there is that potential that someone could judge you for it. But frankly, I would rather be judged for it and not allowed somewhere and be challenged every day to get what I feel I not only deserve, but I do my best with these services. And wouldn't a college want the best from me? And if they're not allowing to be my best, then I don't want to be at that college. And that's my opinion. It doesn't have to be yours. It took me a long time to get here, which is why I'm so strongly advocating for that to be the recommendation. But it doesn't have to be yours. All right, accommodations is an ongoing process. Every semester at most colleges, you'll need to request accommodations from the disability services and be able to inform your instructors. That advocacy not only is important for you to get comfortable doing, but doing it in a way that feels the most natural. And unfortunately, in most college environments, it's a hard, natural feeling to get used to. Typically what happens is you'll have some type of paperwork that the disability services will ask you to have all of your professors sign so that you're able to get these services and everyone is on board to give you these accommodations. So it's awkward to introduce yourself on the first day and say, hi, I'm Sydney. I have dyslexia and ADHD. Can you please give me these accommodations? It's not comfortable. But it is sometimes necessary, and it's so important for you to find out from those colleges. If that doesn't feel natural, then making sure that that's not a part of what the college requires you in order to access those services. You'll have to schedule regular meetings to discuss the effectiveness of your accommodations. What's working, what isn't? Is a teacher not following what they need to, or are they, and it's really helping? It requires you to remain pretty vigilant through the process. And again, the scope of how vigilant is going to be dependent on those types of services and traditionally how supportive of an environment it is. If access is diminished at any point, it still requires you to self-advocate. There's also other accommodations that you can do that go beyond just traditional academic support. It could incorporate student life or campus connectedness, the availability of social pragmatic support or mental health services. It could also go into your career readiness support as well. So yes, the traditional way of accessing the academic support is important, but also how do these services also apply to that support is important. Ask lots of questions. I think that there's so many students out there that fear, I don't know what question to ask. That's okay. Just have a list of those questions going into your colleges. Maybe even give your parents or family that's going with you or friends 2 or 3 questions that's on them to get the answers for. And then you have 2 or 3 questions that you want to answer. These are just a list of some questions. One question that I didn't really think about is how supports are delivered. So you can often ask the question, do you have note-taking services? Or do you have the ability to have a separate testing room? I didn't actually think to ask in the process, how long does it take to get the notes? Or how many students are in a room when you have the request of a separate test room? So being able to sort of know that and look for that, because frankly, most colleges don't go into that detail on their website, and very few places are going to have it other than by talking to the disability services directly. We talked a little bit at the start of the process about that college may not necessarily be the right next step. It could be something that you want to work towards, or even start to explore some other options first. Job internships and training is a great way to explore what's available and possibly even try out something before you go to college. Volunteering, travel, gap years, and transition programs are also options to consider. Summer programs, huge. If you've never been away from your family for more than one night, go to a summer program. Just for a week if you wanted. But to drop your kid off at college and expect it to go smoothly if they've never spent a night away from you is a stress level that both the student and family will have a hard time with. So give yourself the ability to go away. And it will be difficult, probably more difficult for the family than the student, but really important as a part of the process. Give yourself the ability to see what it's like when someone that your family knows you the best, but they also know all of your family habits, and it's sort of built into your family dynamic. It's really important that you put yourself in a new environment and figure out how I'm going to do some of these things for myself. And also the family will start to see, okay, these are some of the things that we also have to work on over the next couple of years, because you'll see some of the pieces that need to be more in place by just giving yourself the ability to be away. All right, we're often asked the question, how can we determine readiness? Here's the best suggestion I have. So for the student, write a list of everything that you do from start to finish of every day. Then for the parent to write a list of everything that you do for your student from start to finish of every day. You could go one step further and say, if there's someone at school, what are they doing for you from start to finish of every day? And then start having a family conversation and comparing lists. Now it's not just about what the student is doing or not doing, which is often the reason that a student doesn't want to talk about college in general or what's next. If you work on getting some of the pieces that are on the school's list and the family list over to the student's list in the time that you have whenever you start this process, this will help you determine what you need to look at for support. If there's certain pieces on this list that you can't move over, then you know that you need to look for a program that offers that support. It also might tell you that maybe things aren't quite at the level that they need to be for the student to be successful away from home. A big one is like waking up, like what happens if the alarm doesn't go off in the morning? What happens? Or a big one for me was calling the doctor's office. And so my mom used to manage all of our calendars because like that's sometimes what moms do. But senior year, it was up to my sister and I to make all of our own doctor's appointments, and basically every type of appointment we could make, we had to make it for ourselves. Now that's a really helpful piece because you're still doing it with your family around you. If there's a question that you don't know, they're right there, but you're the ones calling. Here's another really good tip. To set yourself apart from other students in the college admission process, have the student call. Calling is going to separate you from everyone else because no one calls anymore. Admissions offices love calls. It's a big secret. We love the call. And the calls are where often most of us do best. You might not, but think of it like this. You're the one that's calling over the student who isn't. You're taking that action, and from the college admission perspective, that's really rare. Whether a school counts that or not is irrelevant. However, most colleges do count it for something. Landmark, in particular, counts it as a big part, and part of our scholarships are awarded based off of that advocacy in the process. I promised a little bit about Landmark specifically, and I promise I won't go too much into it. But Landmark College is located in southern Vermont, and we are devoted exclusively to students that have a diagnosis. This was in a relatively recent article submitted by a couple of our different faculty and staff. And this is an important quote. "The barrier to accessing education is not intrinsic to the student, but is created by a mismatch between the student and the educational environment." So here's a little bit about Landmark. We're located in Putney, Vermont, on a beautiful campus of 125 acres. We have about 14 various associate and bachelor degree programs with minors and concentrations as well. We have about 450 students representing 38 states and 10 countries. About 50% of our students are transfer students, which is very important to this conversation. When you hear, "I want to try it somewhere else first," that is a big indicator. 50% of students make that choice of going somewhere else first. And most students choose more than one college first. So when we're also thinking about tuition, and we go back to that data about the 50% likelihood to succeed in 6 years, that's something we want to pay attention to. We have a 7-to-1 student to faculty ratio. And about 87% of our bachelor degree recipients are either employed in graduate school or going on to whatever their goal of which was at the start of their admission process. When we talk about the levels of support, this is pretty much everything that Landmark has to offer. With the student in the middle, the family is still there, but the student's primary sort of support is between the advisor and the resident dean. So these are sort of the access to all the different supports on campus. The student meets with their advisor on a weekly basis, sometimes more than that, especially in their first couple of years. The resident dean is a part of that support process, and all these other supports are sort of built in for when the student needs them. And typically, all these supports also work with each other, excluding counseling, which is our only confidential resource on campus. But everything else pretty much works on a team environment at Landmark. Again, incredibly rare. Another rare part is the family involvement. So long as the student signs our FERPA, which 95% of our students do, the family can remain involved. Now, the family will not be the first point of contact, but that's by design. But many of our families need to remain involved, especially as we build the trust with them, because so many programs have ruined that trust in the process. So when we say, trust us, it will work, we promise, they've had a lot of places that have told them that before. And we also don't say that, but, but that's a lot of what you might hear. So it's really important that we incorporate the family as needed, especially during that transition, which is really important. And here's a little bit more about what we have available. We have multiple different programs, associate degree, bachelor's degrees, a transition at college, which is our form of a gap year that you're still remaining to get college credit for. So it's a kind of a combination, really great option. We have universal design for learning. Perspectives in Learning is a highlight course that teaches the student all about the way that they learn, and that's a first-year experience option. There's a bunch of different program options that we have, but I want to make sure that we also talk about summer programs. We offer a high school program for students that are going into their junior and senior years of high school. We offer a readiness program for students who are going off to a traditional four-year college that isn't Landmark, and we set them up for success to do that. And then we also have a bridge program for visiting college students. And then the last one is we have a boot camp for students, which is really great to really deliver executive functioning strategy building, and that's a one-week option that's all online. All right, so questions. We have just a couple more minutes, really just a couple more minutes. I did want to take a moment to introduce Gabrielle Woolgar. She's our Assistant Director of Admissions, an LC alumna, and she's also our Vermont Territory Manager. So if you're looking to find someone specifically who will work with you in the admissions process, she is the one. And of course, I'll take any questions that people have at this point. Any questions? Any online questions? Okay.
I was just going to say for feedback, our daughter's doing junior year. I got a theater voice. I can be louder if you'd like. Our daughter's doing the online dual enrollment now, and even just that one course, the level of support has been noticeable to a different online college class she's doing for a different school. The level that there's like a coach or someone who checks in with her frequently, it's just been fabulous.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
For her still in high school, it's been a great experience.
Thank you. Sure. So we offer, so we're not NCAA, which is important, but athletics is really important to overall wellness, so it's really encouraged to get involved with something. So we have basketball, soccer, softball, cross-country running. Did I miss one? Oh, thank you. And intramural sports as well. And then we offer club sports as well. So if there's something that we don't have that the student really wants, we are very able to do that. Often, a lot of our students love our rock climbing wall. We do dog sledding in the winter time. Is there a sport that you're looking for specifically?
I was wondering about ultimate and access for skiing.
So we do every weekend, especially in the winter, and this year has been wonderful. We offer a lot of weekend trips to area mountains. I think they said this year we've been to 12 different ski mountains in our Vermont area, some in New Hampshire as well. And we also offer classes as a part of that, and some students when I was a student, I was also a ski coach at Mount Snow on the weekends, so that gave me just kind of direct access, which I really loved working with young children. So we can get you there if that's something that you'd like.
And is counseling services included? I think I saw that.
Yes, 70% of our students use counseling, which is a little bit higher than most colleges, and that's just it. It's a part of the process that you go through, is sort of learning how to process what you're learning, because a lot of it is very emotional. Still probably crying somewhere.
Talk a little bit about student housing and student life.
How it's done at most colleges or Landmark? At Landmark. Okay, great. So at Landmark, the housing process is initially we'll ask for each student to do a housing form. It's a preference form. This is another place where the student would disclose their learning difference if they wanted to, but admissions is not sharing that information. So we're not placing a student with a roommate based off of their learning difference by design. We really want a student to be based off of interest and kind of likes and dislikes. A big one is, how you like to keep your room, clean or dirty, messy, maybe not dirty, but messy, let's call it messy. Where you like to do your work. Are you someone that likes a really quiet environment? Do you like to have people around or not? Probably the questions are asked better than what I'm sharing now. But then we do a placement based off of that. We have a few different housing options, but very, very limited bunk bed options. So it's always pretty much you get your own side of the room, and there's usually 2 to a room in most of our standard options. And then as a student progresses, we also have what we consider premium level housing. So that's where you could start adding like an apartment or suite style living as well.
If a kid needs a medical single, are those available for freshman year, or is that?
Yes.
Upperclassmen because of that premium housing?
Yeah. So it depends on what the medical single is for. Thank you so much. And so I think it's important. A lot of places would say, oh, because you have ADHD, you can have a single. That's our whole population, so that doesn't distinguish you from anything. But depending on what you need it for, oftentimes it comes up with students with social pragmatic needs who really need a place to decompress at the end of the day. Or it could be for students that also have some level of medical need too. But yes, and the importance of going through that process early is important. If you wait till later, we just have less and less available. As far as your other question, you had another one about support. Campus life. Yeah. So our students come from all across the country. A lot of schools our size. The radius to attend college is about 250 miles. Our students are coming from all over. Gabrielle is from Australia. Daniel's from New York. I'm from Maine. But California is usually our number 2 or number 3 largest area. So students are making Landmark their home for the semester. And so because of that, we offer during the weekday, it's usually between 7 to 10 activities. And then on the weekend, that goes up to 14 to 20 during like Saturdays and Sundays. So if you want something to happen, again, just being comfortable and saying it. And typically, if there's one that wants it, there's always more. So we really want the students to be able to sort of tell us what they're looking for if we don't have it, and we'll sort of do what we can to make that happen. A big one this year was pickleball. So we've done a lot with making sure that that's been a really big activity that students have gotten involved with. Same with esports over the last couple of years. That's become a really popular item as well. I'm sure we're at time. Yeah, you were. I can go on for more, but feel free. I'll be around, and so will Daniel and Gabrielle. Thank you all so much for spending your time with us, and good luck with the rest of your day.